Carol Vallely from the GMB. How widespread is this problem of agency workers and this loophole, which is called the Swedish derogation?
We believe it's enormous. It could affect sort of 1.5 million workers. It's very difficult to tell exactly how many because obviously people often have 0 hours contracts or very low hours contracts, and it's just really impossible to know, but it is huge. That's the one thing we do know.
I mean, your focus, your area is Swindon, so I guess you talk to these workers in this factory, in this warehouse and others on a kind of regular basis.
Oh, yes.
What's the feeling you get from workers about what they face when they go into work, not knowing necessarily whether they're going to be required that day and knowing that they get paid differently from other members of staff?
Well, the insecurity of their work is so worrying for them. They don't know whether they'll have 7 hours work one week or they'll have 37.5 hours work. So it means that they don't know if the next week they may in fact be able to feed their children, pay their rent, very basic things. People are working on basic wages, they're all on minimum wage, whereas other people in the same workplace can be earning up to £2 an hour more per hour for doing the same job. So when you're on minimum wage, you don't have a lot of slack in the budget. And if you think, next week, I don't know how much money I'll have coming in, I don't know if I'll be able to pay the rent or if I'll be able to put food on the table. It is that basic. They're also faced with the idea that they can go into work and be told that actually they're not needed and have to go back home. So on a Sunday in particular, they may have had to pay a taxi to get into work because not many people have their own cars, have to pay a taxi to get home again and actually earn no money. And that is really important to them, that they are losing this money. Some days they don't make any money and they lose money.
I mean, some of the workers, I imagine, are able to, for whatever their personal circumstances, able to put a brave face on it. But I imagine you also come across workers where it must cause them, in the kind of circumstances you mentioned, very difficult decisions about their finances and not being able to plan and so forth.
Yes, I mean, heat and eat is something that's used commonly. Do you pay for heating or do you pay for eating? And I've had one member was talking to me about there'd been a mess up with her pay, and she said to me, even £1 is important. And when it comes to the difference between whether she can feed her children or not, even £1 is important. So it's that important to them.
There's several companies involved in this particular case.
Yes.
It's a warehouse that's, as we understand it, run by DHL, but ultimately it's work they're doing for M&S.
It is, yes.
Do you think some of these big companies, DHL and Marks & Spencer, have some responsibility here?
Yes, absolutely. I think the responsibility is theirs. Is there a reason they're using these layers of agency to employ staff? Is it because they actually want to say that they're an ethical employer and they actually don't know what's going on in their supply chain? They do say on their website they have ethical standards, ethical policies, and they look abroad and they're looking at what happens in the factories abroad, and they like to see trade union presence. They want to see people treated correctly. But we say ethical trading begins at home. Marks & Spencer should look at what's happening at home. They should look at what's happening in Swindon.
How important is it for you and the workers you represent to bring this to a wider attention and raise this out here in the European Parliament?
Well, we think it affects so many people, and it is based on legislation that is set in Europe, that it was really, really useful to actually come to the European Parliament and to get it discussed here, and actually for us to bring people who are affected by the policies that are made here to speak to the people that make these policies and explain exactly how it affects them. It's one thing if you're sat in a committee meeting, a committee room making legislation, but it's very different if you're on the other end of that legislation and actually on the other end of how that legislation is being misused. So we wanted to give them examples of how people are affected by this and for them to see how people live with these regulations and how it affects their lives and how it makes their lives so incredibly difficult when all they want to do is go out to work every day, put food on the table and pay for the roof over their heads.
Do you think that this will be changed, this situation? Do you see light at the end of the tunnel?
I really hope it will be changed. I really hope that the people that have listened to us today will go back, they will look at the policies, they will have a picture in their head of how actually these policies affect people, and perhaps in some small way we might have edged them closer to policies which might actually help the people they're aimed at helping.